Welcome to the Widows Collective, where grief meets hope, healing, and community. I'm Lauren Lentz, grief coach, fellow widow, and the heart behind this space. There is life before loss, and then there is life after. If you're here, it likely means your life has been turned upside down by the death of your person. Maybe you've just found yourself in this new world that feels unrecognizable, or maybe you've been walking it for a while, trying to figure out what healing looks like now. I want you to know you are not alone. This podcast is a gathering place for widows living in the after. Together, we'll name the ache, honor the love, and share tools, truths, and stories that help you feel supported along the way. My hope is that every episode gives you a sense of community, comfort, and permission to meet yourself exactly where you are. Hello, and welcome back to the Widows Collective. Today is our final episode in this series on identity loss after the death of a spouse. Episodes 1 and 2 were really about the collapse that happens after loss, the disruption of who we are, the loss of what once felt normal and predictable and safe, and the experience of feeling like parts of you died alongside your person. This episode moves into a different layer of that experience. And before we even begin, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I want to pause with something that may come up for you as you listen. If this episode activates something in you, if you notice that there is resistance or tightness or numbness, frustration, sadness, or even the urge to put pause onto this episode or turn it off entirely, please know that that's okay. You are more than welcome to say, oof, I don't know if this is landing for me yet, and come back to it when you feel called to. More often than not, activation is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something meaningful and tender, sometimes confronting, is being touched inside of you. And I think this particular conversation can stir a lot internally because many widows eventually find themselves holding two truths at once. The first one is this: the recognition that there are parts of you that only existed because he did. And I want to be with that for a second. Parts you may not have experienced before him and may not experience in the same way again. Some relationships create space where aspects of ourselves feel safer to access, more natural to express, more available, more alive. And when that relationship ends through death, there can be a grief not only for the person, but for the version of yourself that existed alongside them. A version of you that now may feel harder or even impossible to access. And then there's a second experience that can show up. And I think this is the one that can be a bit harder to carry. It's this awareness that over time, there are still parts of you that remain. And instead of feeling comforted by that, sometimes it brings guilt or confusion or even questions about meaning. Like, if I can still access parts of myself without him here, does that somehow take away from how special our relationship was, or does it lessen how deeply he shaped me? And I want to speak to this very compassionately today because I don't think either of these experiences cancel the other out. I think that they do often exist at the same time. You can deeply grieve the parts of you that only fully came alive inside that relationship while also slowly learning to recognize that not everything about you disappeared when he did. And so that's what we're going to unpack today, to give language to both sides of an experience that many widows grapple with, whether now or at some point along their journey of widowhood. I want to begin with one of the most common things I hear widows say. He brought out something in me that no one else has. And I think for so many of us, this feels profoundly true. Maybe you felt softer with him, safer or more playful, grounded, more expressive, or more adventurous. Maybe you felt more confident, more emotionally open. You laughed differently with him, dreamed differently with him, felt more connected to yourself and his presence, or even felt fully seen for the first time ever. And when widows talk about this, they are usually not trying to take away from themselves or invalidate their unique qualities, but rather emphasize how invaluable the relationship was to them and the impact that it had on their life. Love changes us. Being deeply known softens and reshapes us. Being emotionally safe settles into our nervous system, and being chosen repeatedly over time leaves its imprint on who we become. Certain relationships create environments where parts of us can come forward more fully, and I think sometimes we rush to make meaning out of this before fully honoring what it is actually like to live inside of this experience and live without it too. There's often a push toward recognizing that those special parts of you that came out are still inside of you. And while there is truth to that, it can also miss something really important about relational identity. Often it's inside the rushing of the process that makes things complicated for widows, because when friends and family or support and society begin to say, these parts of you are still a part of you, something inside can resist that immediately. And I want to acknowledge that that objection, no matter how big or small, is important. It's normal and it's natural. Sometimes it sounds like, I'm not sure I'm ready to hear this right now, or something about this feels like it moves too fast past what I'm still holding. Or even if it's true, what does it mean about what he meant to me? Or what does it mean about us if parts of me can still exist without him in the same way? And does that take away from how unique what we had felt? These questions are simply our brain trying to make meaning from what is being presented in front of us, because what you're trying to protect is not just memory. It's the significance of the relationship. So when this resistance shows up, it can be helpful to slow the framing of it all down, because often what feels dismissive is not what is actually being said. It's how quickly it's being said. That pressure to remove yourself from the ache of it all. When people say, you're still here, they're not saying nothing changed. They're not saying nothing was lost or that you can simply return to who you were before. What they're often trying to point to is something more precise. That while certain ways of being are in fact shaped and expanded through relational safety and love, there are also aspects of you that do not fully disappear. And one of the most helpful distinctions in grief work is this: knowing that there are aspects of you that were deeply shaped by him. There are aspects of you that predated him. And there are aspects of you that are still becoming now. None of these things cancel each other out. They exist together. Sometimes it can feel like a contradiction, but more accurately, it's the complexity of identity under grief. And the more we can stay with that complexity, the more we can begin to meet what is actually happening inside of us instead of flattening it into something easier to hold. The more space we can make for it all. Let me take a moment to break that down. The first layer is what we might call the relationally activated self. These are the ways of being that came more fully online in the context of your relationship, the way you softened in his presence, the emotional states that felt easier with him, the version of you that emerged when you felt seen, the nervous system ease that came through co-regulation, the identity shaped through daily relational feedback and mirroring. These are the parts of you that feel like, this is who I became with him. So when your person dies, this relationally activated self can feel harder or impossible to access, unfamiliar, inconsistent, or distant. And not because it was imagined, but because that relationship that supported this is no longer there. And then there are aspects of you that are not dependent on one relationship to exist. Things like your temperament, emotional wiring, humor, intuition, sensitivity or resilience, personality structure, relational capacity. These are not created by the relationship, but they are often expressed more fully within it. And after a loss like this, even these can feel harder to access. And it's not because they're gone, but it's because your nervous system has shifted into survival, and survival changes your access. It can make you feel like parts of yourself are muted or buried or are all of a sudden unreliable and out of reach. And in that space, it's incredibly common for a voice to emerge that says, I've lost myself, or I don't know who I am anymore. And I don't want to rush past that, because for many widows, this isn't just a thought, it's a true identity rupture, especially if you grew up alongside your partner in adulthood, if your preferences and routines were deeply co-constructed, or if he became a primary mirror for who you were becoming. In those cases, the question, who am I now, is not abstract, it's real, and it deserves to be held with care. But underneath it, for many of us, what's actually happening when we say, I don't know who I am anymore, is I cannot access myself in the same way right now. And those are very different truths. When both of these truths are present at the same time, there are aspects of me that only fully came alive with him, and there are aspects of me that are still here. Our emotional system, our mind, doesn't always know how to hold that tension. So you may move between thoughts of, I'm not who I was at all, to something in me is still here, to I don't recognize myself, back to I can feel something familiar for a moment. And I encourage you, instead of trying to resolve that tension, try to learn how to stay inside it without collapsing into certainty, because grief doesn't offer certainty. It offers relationship with complexity. What unfolds over time is not a return to who you were. And it's also not a reinvention. It's something in between. You begin to re-encounter yourself. And it doesn't happen in some straight line. It doesn't happen overnight. You just wake up and you're back to some version of who you used to be. But it happens in moments where you might have a familiar reaction or a flicker of an emotion that you haven't seen in a while, or a version of your humor, or a preference that might surprise you, or a memory that moves through your body differently. And sometimes it catches you off guard because it doesn't feel like it belongs to who you are now. But it also doesn't belong to who you were before. It belongs somewhere in that liminal space. And this is where something begins to be understood with time. Identity is not fixed. It's responsive, and it reorganizes over and over again. So when we begin to recognize that our identity is always reorganizing itself, and that we are still figuring out how to honor and grieve the person we were with our person, we begin to move very tenderly toward becoming in a way that can hold all of it. Because the truth, sometimes a very sharp truth, is that there is no going back. There is no restoring what was lost, or replacing what was lost, or recreating what once existed. But it's also not about erasing what the relationship shaped in you either. There's just so much here. That part does remain, and it belongs as a part of your continued story, even if it feels like a different life altogether right now. So then the question becomes less about how do I understand all of this and more about how to live it. And there is no way to rush this or to resolve the tension between those two truths just by thinking something differently. You may begin slowly to orient your life in a way that doesn't require you to choose. Sometimes that looks like letting something be true without forcing it into certainty. Noticing what feels reachable today without judging what doesn't. Allowing what was shaped in love to remain meaningful without needing to measure whether it still defines you in the same way. I think it's important to recognize that it can be really scary to think that you were becoming someone entirely new. And so there's a shift here because you're not becoming someone entirely new. Your person shaped you, and that will be carried forward into your life. I think it's just about the recognizing that we can't return to who we were because that version of life no longer exists in the same way. It's learning how to stay in relationship with yourself as you are now without abandoning what was formed with him and without abandoning what is still forming in you. And I'll say it again, it takes time, more time than we often give it. So even though this was kind of a short episode, it was a lot to sit with today. And I want to honor that. If this conversation felt layered, if it feels like more than one thing can be true at the same time, if it feels hard to land in a single explanation or in one final podcast episode, there's nothing you need to do with that right now. You are not meant to resolve your feelings of identity loss quickly. You are not meant to choose one version of truth and discard the other. You're not meant to rush into getting clear about who you are now. That is part of the journey. You're simply beginning to notice what was shaped through your relationship, what still exists at your core, what feels harder or impossible to access, and what is still unfolding. All of that can coexist and not make it mean that your person didn't matter or that they didn't nurture something beautiful inside of you. You are allowed to grieve the parts of you that only fully came alive with him. And you are also allowed to discover that there are parts of you still here, even if they feel buried right now, even if thinking about that feels like it exposes other beliefs you may still be working through. Grief doesn't move in resolution. It moves in relationship. It moves in integration. And you are allowed to stay in relationship with yourself right here, exactly as this is. Thank you for making space for all that might have come up today. Thank you for allowing me the time to live inside of your experience and to speak to this experience. I hope something in here today touched something inside of you. And if you're not yet ready for this, that's okay too. Until next episode, big hugs and lots of love. You've been listening to The Widows Collective. I'm Lauren Lentz, and it means so much to me that you spent this time here today. If you found comfort or connection in today's episode, I invite you to please subscribe, leave a rating, or share it with someone who might need a little support. You can also follow me on Instagram at I'm Sorry We're Friends and join my email list at laurenlentz.com to explore my one-to-one grief coaching, group program, retreats, and other tools designed to help widows navigate loss with understanding and guidance. I hope you'll join me next week for another conversation where we'll continue exploring grief, healing, and ways to reimagine life after loss. I'm sorry you're here, and I'm so grateful that you are. Thank you for being a part of this community. Your presence is an act of courage and self-compassion, and I'm honored to walk this path alongside you.